First of all, thank you so much for everything you did over the last 2 days to welcome students, parents, families in your classrooms for conferences. I know that as a parent, I always hoped that I was going in for firming up the partnership between me and the teacher. If there was anything that I could do to help, I wanted to know that. I know all of your parents are just like that.
Are we supposed to use that?
I have to admit, I probably didn't live that way a few times, but I want to thank you for what you did. And I always hear great things about conferences, so thanks so much. My role here today is to do a little intro. Also, want to let you know happy St. Patrick's Day. I got the corned beef and cabbage at home. It'll be in the crock pot sometime tomorrow or Sunday morning. And it's a good day. Opportunity. 32. So how do we get here? A lot of people really want to know how do you get here? How do we get to this point where we're having a workshop on race and racism? And I want to let you know first off that when I talk about this topic, it can be uncomfortable for me. Not only it can be, it generally is. Because I'm a white guy and I'm worried I'm going to mess it up. I hear and learn things that push me out of my comfort zone. And then I'm also worried, should I feel guilty? And if I feel guilty, what should I do? So this conversation for me is never easy, and if you feel some discomfort, it's okay. We got here like this. You remember 3 or 4 years ago, Rutland stood a chance of having refugee resettlement in town. We had very active people working to get refugees to come here, and then we had an active group working against that. We had a divided town. As a leadership group, we started studying the book Courageous Conversations About Race and trying to marshal our learning so that we might be able better to serve any new person that walks into our district. We are a public school. We love and welcome everybody. That was 3 or 4 years ago. Last year, we did have a student-on-student attack. I had to investigate it. I came to your faculty meeting. I did a presentation called Discomfort is the Ally of Learning. Because that so shook me seeing it that I wondered, how is it possible that our students believe and act this way? And I wanted your help. And since then, many, many people have come forward to say, here's an idea, here's how I can help, here's what I can do. And I really appreciate that. Last June, before Mary Moran retired, she said, we really need to get something going on this. I said, I'm on it. The target was to have something in place for the opening of school in August. I failed and missed that target. The conversation is the most important thing. One of the conversations I had along the way was with a group called the Washington Consulting Group. They have worked with other schools in Vermont. I spoke with Dr. Sam Offer from Baltimore. He was wonderful. He was understanding, helpful. He had solutions. He had ideas. He made a proposal. It was expensive. We said, okay, we're using grant funds. We got to get other bids. And we looked for another organization that had a good reputation among schools in the state of Vermont that could offer a similar setup for us. Peace and Justice Center has worked with at least a dozen other schools, districts, and SUs in Vermont doing this work. They're cheaper.
Nonprofit.
Nonprofit. So we started that work back in June. In June, the school board was interested in this. You're going to have bias training, aren't you, Mr. Bliss? Joanne Pensack. You're going to have bias training, aren't you? Yes, we are. Yes, Ms. Pensack, yes. So we didn't get it going, so we got this set up for now. In the fall, we had an adult-on-adult racial harassment issue. I made the claim Since I made a claim I could not investigate it, we got a third-party investigator. Okay? When these things happened, when I did the discomfort is the ally of learning, when we had this adult-on-adult situation, people came to me and said, "Oh, Bliss, you just peeling back the onion. It's under there." I want you to know this. You are not here because anybody thinks you are a racist. That's not it. We heard that. People say, the only reason you want me to do this is because you think I'm a racist. I don't think anybody's a racist. I know you welcome, love, clothe, feed, nurture, all the while teaching your students. And on many days, there are students who walk out the doors that would not have survived if not for you. I do not think you are a racist. I don't think anybody does. But the truth is, this conversation is critical. Our school district and community are evolving, and we have a vision, mission, and desire to have a district and organization that welcomes and respects all people. That's how we got here. So the idea is that this is just a conversation starter to give us a foundational understanding of what racism is. And maybe a little bit about, like, so how do I think about it, and what need do I have the next step? Okay? Here are some facts. People of color are 5 times more likely to be incarcerated in the United States than their white counterparts. In Vermont, it's 10 times more likely. Across the country, students of color are 4 times more likely to be suspended from school. Our own data is that our own students of color are 2.5 times more likely to be suspended. For me, as a parent, educator, educational leader, it just says, Bliss, you should ask some questions about that of yourself and what you're doing. So those are important things. That's why we're here. Real fast. This nice smiling lady, Rachel. There's a smile. When she walked into intermediate school on Wednesday, I realized I knew her. She was at my wedding.
It's not why I was hired.
My wife Ginger, when she first moved to Burlington some years ago, she rented a room from Rachel and Jules and was there when at least one of their children was born. And so they are really good pals. And I didn't know she was coming until I saw her face. And then she went, "Oh, it's Rob. You're the Rob that's on the emails." So we have this connection, which I just want to let you know about. And it was really cool. We got to close that. I took her, Ginger's down helping her family in Pennsylvania. So I took a selfie of Rachel and I together. And I shot it off to her, and she got to keep that up. So anyway, I want you to please, if you would, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for everything you do. Welcome, Rachel and Peace and Justice Center.
I'm really loud usually, but we're doing, I've got a new thing going on where I'm thinking a lot more about accessibility. And for anybody who's got any hearing limitations, I understand microphones help, even with those of us who are really good at projecting. So here I am with mine, which I'm not used to. So I'm Rachel Siegel, I'm the Executive Director of the Peace and Justice Center. I'm going to let my colleagues, facilitators, introduce themselves, and then I'll give you a lot more nuts and bolts about what's coming.
Hi everybody, my name is Tanisha Coleman. I'm going to be your co-facilitator. On my day-to-day, I work at UVM.
Hi, my name is Mary, she, her pronouns. I'm a freshman at American University, and I also went through Southland High School.
My pronouns are she, her.
I'm Georgia Lamb. My pronouns are she and her. I work at the Peace and Justice Center, and I'm also a graduate of Rutland Schools.
Lisa wants to have Georgia. She's going to school in Rutland. I know that's part-time. So I also use she, her pronouns, and I apologize for forgetting to do that and trying to do that up front. Also want to say 2 things right off the bat. There's a camera here, which might change the tone of ability to share out loud when there's opportunities to do that, for which I apologize. The video, as I understand it, is just going to be used for people who weren't able to be at any of these 5 sessions so that they can witness the same thing. And then the Peace and Justice Center will have access to it, and we might use parts of it at times. The other thing is that some of your colleagues might be in a different space right now. There's an affinity space for people of color. Did you all see an email about that? And were some of you confused about that? Or did you hear about some confusion? There was a fair bit of confusion that we heard about. So I just want to try to explain it out loud, since sometimes reading it is harder than hearing it. The idea with the affinity space, is it picking up sound? I was told I should stay here. Okay. You'll tell us if we get out of range. The idea with an affinity space is that when you're doing work on an issue of oppression, something that hurts other people, sort of categorically, that it can be really useful to let people be in a group with their own people in terms of that identity that we're exploring. So when we're exploring race, it can be helpful for people to be in like groups and affinity spaces based on race. The hope and the idea is that then we're able to be together in a more real way and a more integrated way. The idea is not to separate people by race and leave it there. That would be wholly problematic. It's just about creating a space where some people will feel like they can express themselves differently than they might be able to in a mixed space. So if you didn't see the email, or if you're hearing it differently and you identify as a person of color, it might be very weird to do this, but you are still welcome to go to the affinity space. George is about to go there, so that might not be possible at this point, but you are welcome to anyway. Psychologically, that's pretty weird to stand up in front of your colleagues, but I'm totally fine with it. So if anybody does want to take advantage of that, that's what's happening. Any questions about why we do the affinity space, or do any of you want to add anything?
I just wanted to recognize that as a person of color, I may have certain things about race that when talking with a white person, we might not just be on the same level to like conversate about those things, because those are really different experiences, and it's really helpful to talk to people who may have that similar experience to realize like where is it different and how can we cultivate support, and what can we do on the individual level and what can we do as a collective. So affinity spaces are really great to have that individual reflection, and then afterwards everybody can come together and share out where they're comfortable to be like, oh, in this space we talk about X, but this is what I want to do with you in partnership on race. So yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. All right, so a little bit about the Peace and Justice Center. We're 40 years old. We're a statewide, nonprofit, membership-based organization. We do a lot that is like this, a lot of educational workshops in a lot of different settings, sometimes for the public, sometimes for contracted to come in. And we do a lot in addition to the educational workshops and programs that we do. This is a workshop, it's not a training. We're very explicit about that in our language, because to me a training sounds like you'll become certified in something. And you're not going to be certified as like an anti-racist or as an ally or anything. That doesn't exist, unfortunately. That would have been nice. I would have taken that option. It doesn't exist. We're going to scratch the surface, and hopefully people are either already on a lifelong journey or want to get on a lifelong journey, and that this is helpful for that. So it's a workshop, it's an educational opportunity. Don't go away and say you were there, please. In addition to these workshops, we have a lot of programs on economic justice, on peace and human rights. We do advocacy, legislative work, community organizing, and nonviolent action. We support the work of other people all over the state who are doing social justice related activities. And we actually, before we got this contract, we started planning an event called the Social Justice Symposium here in Rutland. We've done this event in Burlington twice, and we decided time to take it on the road. It's an opportunity to highlight the work that's happening locally, so like Indivisible Castleton and some of the social justice groups here at the high school, some of the student-led groups, some of the faith-based groups, the training center, different groups that are like on the ground doing work will be there, hoping to find people who are interested in joining the work they're doing and supporting it and having an opportunity to connect with one another. So Social Justice Symposium and Block Party, which is scheduled to be here on the 19th. So also you'll be hearing about it since you work in the building, and we might ask you to use your classroom or the radio codes. So more to come on that. Handed out newsletters, so if you want to know more about our work as a whole, please take the time to read that. It's also available online. If you do take it with you to read it when you're done, I encourage you to give it to somebody else to read, or leave it in the lobby or a waiting room somewhere so that somebody happens upon it and spread the word that we're here to support people's work. And if you want more information, like I said, we're membership-based. Memberships start with $15 an hour. We depend on it to do the work that we do. So there's a membership brochure that goes over our programs. And then there's an educational program catalog that we also have up here. That's, a lot of our workshops are multi-part workshops. We come to different communities and do them, like I said, for the public or contracted in if you're part of the group and you might want us to do one of these, be in touch. Also, a lot of them are one-time things, which are really accessible to high school students. A lot of programs, films, and sessions that we can read. So this is available online, or we have paper copies up front, and maybe we can take it. If you do have to leave early, there's also a feedback form up there. Please fill out a feedback form. Well, that's all I have.
So I just wanted to clarify that most of you just held up, that you said it's the 19th, March, April?
Oh, I'm sorry. May.
Oh, good.
May 19th, we have some time. There's also, these are here with the hope that some of you will take one and post it at the grocery store or community place that you go to. And it's open for all ages. Okay, so that's who the Peace and Justice Center is. And I want to let you know that the work that we're doing with you today is something that's happening all over the country and all over Vermont. And that there are some people who've been doing this work for a long time. And there's some people who are just starting. And I don't know where each of you are individually, but I want you to know that you're part of a collective, just by sitting here right now. You're part of a movement that can make the world really a lot better for all of us. I think I'm ready for the next slide. So that's the welcome. After that, we're going to do all these other things that are on the list. I'm not going to read. And I want to go over what this is not briefly, because we were called and asked to do a cultural competency training, and I said, well, we don't do training. I explained that. And I said, we don't really talk about cultural competency in those words, but I think the Seeing and Disrupting Racism workshop will cover things and sort of tend the soil so that people can move toward what they think of as cultural competency. I think that term is sometimes problematic because it's unclear what it means, and it sometimes is like a euphemism for something like, which culture are we talking about? And can you become competent? So it's not a cultural competency training, but hopefully it helps people to learn how to be more affirming and welcoming and understanding of cultures that aren't our own. It's not a how-to. You're not going to leave here and be like, when my student says X, I'm going to do Y. We're not going to give you any fill-in-the-blank sentences because each scenario is really different. And what we want to do is sort of get your heart open enough that you're motivated to do this work so that you can fill your mind with information, and then you can move your feet and your mouth to take action. And we can't tell you the script, unfortunately. Or we would have marketed that. And it's also not about curriculum development. You're the curriculum experts, not me. I'm not in the school. I trust you all to do that way better than I ever could. And again, the idea is to get your hearts and minds in a place where when you're doing curriculum work and you're making decisions about what you're going to do in your classrooms with the students, that you do it through what I think of as an anti-racism lens and with a mindful of racial justice. Does that make sense? So, sorry, no curriculum coming at you, you get to do that amongst yourselves. So land recognition is something that's important for us to do before we launch into all the material. It's an opportunity to just sit with the fact that we're on land that wasn't originally settled by colonists. It was originally here and lived on for centuries by indigenous people. And I think that that's something that we don't often think about, and it's easy to numb out about it. It's very hard to think about what happened historically, and it's easy to think about it as history. And it's not just history, there's still Native American, maybe you're Native American, Abenaki people have light skin, you can't tell who's necessary, there's not like a distinction, there's not a flag that people walk around with. So, does anybody know anything more? Like, there's different bands of Abenaki. Do you know who was in the Rutland area? Because I actually do not, I haven't looked it up. So it'd be great information to know, and I'm sorry that I didn't look it up, but you all have as much access to Google as I do, probably. And so it'd be cool to let your students know also where we are. All right. You're up.
So now we're going to get into our group agreements, and this is how we decide to be in community with one another today as we engage in conversation around race. So the first one is listen to believe. We are aware it's about to be lunchtime. So people are like, oh, whatever I have to put in that microwave, I'm ready. But also, this is mandatory. So some people want to be here, others don't, and then a lot of people may be feeling uncomfortable about it being mandatory. So we just want to name that so people can open their hearts and minds to listen to the content and not focus on those pieces. And then for the next one, expect discomfort and stay engaged. So as I said, race is a heavy topic for a lot of different reasons. So you may experience heavy emotions, guilt, shame, but the thing is to not focus on the guilt and shame, but to lean into it and be like, why? What's going on? And then for the next one, confidentiality. There's going to be times where everybody can share stories with one another based on their personal experiences. And it's nothing like being vulnerable and then someone sharing your information. That's really harmful and toxic, and it breaks down relationships. So share the lesson, but don't share the personal information. And then with monitor your emotional experience. So like I said, you're gonna feel different emotions, or you might not feel certain emotions. And it's important to think about why you feel what you feel, or why you don't feel what you feel, or what you should feel, or what you want to feel. And then for the next one, accept and expect non-closure. So with that, it's short, we're ready for lunch. We are not gonna have a lot of time to process everything. So there may be some questions or scenarios that you wanna run by us, but just because of the content and everything we have to go through, we won't be able to cover it, and being okay with that. And the conversation doesn't have to end here. You can engage with each other, have lunch, meet up, and talk. And then with the take space, make space, I am an external processor. I know what I want to say, when I want to say it, and I'm ready. But for a lot of people, they need to think about it and process. And if I'm talking all the time, I'm not allowing other people's voices to be heard. So that means I have to learn how to step back and allow those voices to be heard. And then for the people who are more quiet in these settings, this is your time to be brave and speak up and to share your ideas with one another. And then oops, ouch, and what. So with oops, you may have said something by mistake. Ooh, I'm sorry, and then you apologize and you acknowledge the harm. And then with ouch, ooh, I felt that. That was a little offensive. So thinking about the emotions you're feeling when we're talking about this content and whether you feel offended or not. And then thinking about how you want to move forward with that offense, whether you want to talk about it or not, or if you need to process. And then with what, it's about clarification. So we may say something that naturally you just don't get right off the bat, and that's a time to pose those questions or for us to reword language so you can have a better comprehension. So does everybody agree to those terms? Yes. Thumbs up, yes? Thank you, thank you, thank you. So this is one of these opportunities where we can think about racism before we really dive into the content. And for this is to think about your own personal experience of saying like a slur, or whether you had an idea or thought or interaction that was racist. An example that I've been giving everybody about fried chicken and black people. So only black people can cook good fried chicken. I don't want their macaroni, I don't want their collard greens, I just want their chicken. And that is racist because you're just assuming that just because they're black and based on their race, they can cook chicken and they can't cook anything else. So just to think about any thoughts, ideas, or experiences that you have of racist behavior, and we want people to pair up and share. So we'll give you time to do that. quiet out, and it worked then and it worked now. So does anybody want to be brave and share out to the audience about what we talked about with Margaret?
So I teach English and I write writing with kids. Sometimes it's hard to manage. And one day, like one of my first couple of years here, kids were talking about American trucks, this, that, and the other, and they said something like, well, you know what, those rice burners, they don't do too well. And so, I looked at them and said, all right, be like Lionel Richie, we'll do this all night long. So, and so I talked about Priuses and how there's that recall about, faulty accelerator pedals. And I said, you know what, we won't complain about that, just the Americans, because my people are known for one-way, non-stop, direct flight. Because if you die, you become a legend. And some people got that understood.
Thank you. And I think it's very important when things happen like that you try to help people understand from language that they use how it's harmful to say certain things. Because sometimes when you just give an example, unless it's personal, they don't really get it. But that example right there, some of them have the comprehension, be like, oh, that's what I just did to you? Wow, that's messed up. Anybody else want to share out? Do you want the mic or?
No, I can talk.
All right.
I just wanted to share different perspective that concerns me as a teacher. My concern as a teacher is you may hear two students of color go down the hall referring to each other in a way that you know is inappropriate. And I think you all know what I'm trying to say. And if I'm an adult in the hall, I would say to them, please don't say those things. And they'll say, hey, I can say what I want to say. The problem that concerns me is how do I, and I know you're not answering questions, but one of my concerns is how do you explain to a ninth grader who's hearing this language from a perspective of another race, and then goes and says to one of those guys, hey, so-and-so, we're using the appropriate word, and then hurts them. And so I guess part of my concern, or what I see happening a lot of times within the top race, with any group, is demonstrating the wrong thing, but then trying to explain to somebody else why they can't say it.
That is a great example. And the nice thing about this workshop is at the end, all those complex things, you can talk with another partner about after this content, how would you do things differently? And what do you think you could do better in similar situations? So remember what was shared, and if that's something you also want to brainstorm with after you have the content here, we can gladly do that. Thank you so much for sharing. Oh, I forgot about the clicker. So now this is the part of the presentation where we're going to start getting into the important lingo. And this is so we all just have a common knowledge of the language we're talking about and the concepts. So for the Peace and Justice Center, racism is power plus prejudice. And power is the part where white people just by nature have more advantages than people of color. And the fact is, just by your skin color, your group affiliation, you have a higher status. It's not something that you wanted, you're just born with. And the fact of the matter is, as a person of color, I do not get those advantages. Not because I want them or not, it's just the way it is, because by nature, white people colonized the country, and they have a primary power still today. And even if you have a person of color in power, the pressure that is put on them to fit a certain image or to lead a certain way is not put on a white person. You can have a white male in power and be like, oh, they can do it. They're controlled. I think they really know what they're talking about. And then, let's say if I was in charge, oh, she a black woman, she might get aggressive. Oh, I don't know what she's gonna say to me. Maybe she's gonna label me a certain way because she's black. And those expectations are completely different just because of my skin color and my race. So that's where the power comes from. And then the prejudice is also in that. And prejudice is a feeling. So when you think about black people, you feel like, oh, they're this certain way. Or when you think about Mexicans or people who are Latinx, oh, they're violent people. Oh, they're really macho. I don't know if I'm gonna interact with them. And the combination of the two equates to the racism. So you have the power where there's a social hierarchy, and then based on your status, you're awarded certain things. And then with the feeling, that equates to be like, oh, I'm not gonna interact with these people because I have this prejudice. Do you wanna add?
Yeah.
Or
I want to frame power in another way also, in addition to it being about personal status and advantage. It's also more holistic Who are the decision makers, right? The decision makers have power. And who are the decision makers racially when we look at government? What race? What race do we see in power as being in charge of universities and higher education? White people. In charge of banks? White people, right? In charge of medical centers and research centers and the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, right? So there's a lot of power held by white people. White people in Congress could reverse the 13th Amendment. There's enough of them. Even if the president vetoed it, they could override the veto if all white people were of that mind. Thankfully, that's not happening, but in terms of numbers of who's in power, we could do some damage and we can do some good. So I'm excited to do good. Prejudice. Anyone has prejudice? Who has bias? Yeah, everybody, right? You can't avoid it. So we have to be constantly unpacking it because we're being constantly fed it. There's no done, there's no check box. Constantly being inundated with our society. We're swimming in it. So I've got power as a white person and I've got prejudice because I'm a human being. So where's that leave me? I've got work to do. Oh, it's me again.
Oh, cool. That's great.
Did you introduce the podcast?
Yeah, so we have a podcast called Code Switch, and it talks about racism. And it provides definitions of key terms when you think of racism. And the cool thing about this podcast is they bring in a person of color to break it down. And also, it's nice about this podcast is people of color run it. So you do have that minority perspective, but they also invite other people as well who are part of the majority culture to have like both sides. So it's a nice podcast that gives you a well-rounded perspective of what racism is, how we classify it, how we define it, and some of the issues it causes in our nation. And we're gonna watch.
Up vanished and housed up words. We present an all-new podcast, Atlanta Monster.
And we're back with our next guest, Philip Goff. He's one of the leading experts on the psychology of racism. And he's the president of the Center for Policing Equity. He helps police departments measure just how much they're discriminating. Various Code Switch team members have called him up to pick his brain. If speed dial were still a thing, he'd be on jeans. But this is his very first time on the podcast.
Phil, finally, welcome to Code Switch. That's right, Eugene.
Phil says people tend to be imprecise when they're talking about racism and use words that have very different meanings. So he kicks things off by defining some terms.
We start with the stereotype, because the stereotype is just an idea. So you and I may know the stereotype that black people are good at basketball, but if you've ever seen my crossover, we know the stereotype is not. And then we go into the prejudice, right? Now the prejudice is the feeling. The values don't like that group. It's a feeling. And we talk about the difference between prejudice and bigotry is the feeling, and or you believe the darn stereotype. Then we get discrimination. Discrimination is when you act on any of that stuff. Now, you don't have to believe the stereotype to act on it. You can discriminate without having malice towards any group, right? But the behavior is discrimination. That's what's key to that word. Now, racism, why would you need to talk about racism if you've got racial stereotypes, racial prejudice, racial bigotry, racial discrimination? Well, because none of those words capture what happens when there's a pattern or there's social structures set up to support a pattern of those behaviors. The problem is that the vast majority of people who use the term think that the most important thing to understand about racism is not the pattern of harms that accrue to the group. It's the moral character of the perpetrators. And that's where we get into problems.
Break that down so it's not so academic sounding.
Be less like yourself. No problem. So, remember Don Imus got a big dust up because he referred to the Rutgers women's basketball team as some nappy-headed hoes. The conversation that ensued was about whether or not Don Imus was racist in his heart. And there was almost no conversation that I found in public discourse about the conversation I had to have with my two goddaughters about why it was best for them to go ahead and blow dry their hair when they went to school the next day. About, yes, in fact, some people at your school are going to make fun of you for how you wear your hair. They're more likely to want to touch it. And that's going to feel icky to you, in part because of this history. You're going to pick up on that history. You're going to feel a bit of it. That's the harms that comment did. That's the reason why we should care. We had no conversation about that. What we talked about was Donovan's character. That we cared about that, and we didn't care about my goddaughters, is racist.
So when President Trump describes Haitian immigrants as having AIDS, says if the U.S. accepted Nigerian
I'm gonna give you a minute to process the people near you, what you heard from that, maybe something that resonated, talk about how it landed for you, whether it was something, a question you had, or something that was resonated. Just be brief for a minute.
And it'd be nice to have them brainstorm with each other.
Yes, and then share out.
Yeah.
Oh, I have the.
You've got the clicker. Okay.
Oh, you gotta. It works. See?
All right, I'd like to just ask for a couple of people around the middle, get all of you, a couple people to share what you talked about with your people.
I was talking about how movie do the right thing. And I think I just watched it with my son the other day. And as I was watching it, I thought back to the very first time I saw it and the destruction of the Italian pizzeria. And how bad I felt when I first saw it. And I focused on the Italian Americans. And how bad I felt for them. And without thinking also that radio graffiti
Who's next? Was it useful hearing this? Yes. Was there anything new in it? Just help solidify some things? Cool. One of the things that I think is really useful in it, that it very much clarifies to me, is that this idea of reverse racism is a myth. That there can be race prejudice against me as a white person, for sure. And I have been in environments and in situations where people discriminated against me because I was white. Fine. To me, that's not racism. Race-based prejudice or race-based discrimination might be race-based bigotry. It's not racism because there's not a pattern in our society of me being killed by the police, me being incarcerated, me being kicked out of preschool at exorbitant rates compared to people of color. The reverse of, that's what happens. So racism is a one-way street in the way that we define it. And definitions, I think, are only so useful. It's not the end-all, be-all, and we get hung up on who defines words by what. Like Bruce Webster, why does he get so much authority? Words evolve. I think that they're useful so that when we're using a word here today, you know how we're using it. Yeah?
I think one of the things that this just makes me angry. I remember when he said that. I remember what happened. And I taught school in Baltimore for 12 years. And we had this conversation all the time with my students. Because if it's wrong, then why did something happen to that guy? And so I have nothing to give students who are equally frustrated and whose minds are still forming. And it feels like we're in this hard, we have to be flexible, we have to be open, we have to understand, and yet the powerful, usually white people, including today, during the presidential campaign, the language in this building among students shifted. And the response was, well, the candidate says it, and now it's, well, the president says it. And so we're in a great workshop space with our kids because we developed the relationship to have those conversations. What I feel impotent about is that there isn't the right thing getting done. And in terms of the Me Too movement, okay, so that guy gets fired and this guy gets fired. Is that the right thing? I'm not sure we know what the right thing is, but we're definitely on the growing edge with our students on a daily basis. And the frustration is powerful.
Thanks for sharing that. There isn't any one right thing, but there are lots of right things, and there's a lot of right things happening. And if you want to be involved, you can find them, and I can help you find them if you want help. There's a lot of really amazing initiatives going on in Vermont and nationally. And it's not, we're not getting out of this mess quickly. We didn't get into it quickly. This is deeply embedded stuff. And we can chip away at it, and we can plant seeds, and there are ripple effects. And to me, if I don't hang on to hope, nothing's going to change. Like, maybe if I do some work, it'll change. If I do no work, it's definitely not changing. So I hope it's only yeah.
I think that somebody's physical appearance or their culture is so superficial. I think the real issue is mindset and heart. And I think all of us in here would love to teach our students to be more mindful and have more heart.
Yeah.
Because once that happens, then all of those superficial cultural color issues, I think eventually go away. Because you're actually learning what somebody has noticed.
Yeah, building empathy is a great way to undo racism. There's also a lot of other things because it's also much more than just personal. So we'll get into that in a minute.
I just want to quickly say about your point. I think expressing frustration in the classroom is really helpful. It's like saying that this thing happened and that you might not see, you know? Like, you're always carrying something, like, whether it be in the news or interpersonal, you don't know, you know? And so, like, when something in the news happens, like, everybody knows about it, and I feel like when a student's given the space to be able to express what that means to them, I think it makes learning a lot easier, because when you have something on your mind you can't talk about, like, it's really affecting you, but now, you know, like, it's deeply emotional, like, sometimes you can't learn because you're so focused on that, and you're not given the space to, like, talk about it, or debrief it, or, like, name it even, or, like, know that your teacher has your back, then you're not able to, like, focus, you know? So I think that what you're just saying, like, expressing that anger does make a difference, even if it's not changing what happened, it changes the atmosphere in the classroom.
Yeah.
And what I wanted to say is your students will know that you're not okay with that. And they will feel comfort with that, and y'all can have conversations to be like, as a class, this is what we commit to cultivate a certain type of space and to not tolerate certain things. So I think it can be small things. I don't know, write a letter to Congress, you know, like doing all these different things that can implement change. It takes time, but it's worth it, because in the long run, we're thinking about the people who come after us and what they have to deal with. So, thank you so much for that. So now we're going to get into the different types of racism. So for the first one, it focused on person to person. So for an individual, I like to think of, let's say you own a house, a white person owns a house, and they make the decision to be like, I'm only going to rent to whites only. No people of color, nope, I'm not going to do it. And that's individual racism, because the person is making their own decision to not allow certain people to live there based on their race. And then with internalized racism, one thing I like to think about is the norm that people of color need to be lighter. Some people might say, my dark skin, it's too dark. Why don't I bleach my skin to be lighter? So that's an internalized racist thing to say, because you're saying that my pigment is too much for you, so I have to be lighter to fit in with you. And then with institutional. So this is a policy or enforcement that a company or a school puts into place. So for example, let's say I work in corporate America, and the business I'm employed at, they say, oh, African Americans can only have certain hairstyles. And they put this in their employee manual under the dress code and how I'm supposed to appear. That is an institutional racist thing, because you have a practice that limits my racial identity. Let's say I want to wear a dress, and it's like, no dress. Well, that means I can't work here. And then with structural racism, think about legacy students. So these are students who get a scholarship for having a family member that attended the school before. And the issue with legacy students is before, most colleges were all white. People of color were not allowed to attend. So by nature, more white people are going to get that scholarship over students of color, and a lot of institutions still have this in place across the country. So therefore, it's structural, because it's not just one institution or one place of employment, it's across the board. So does each one of these make sense to people? Does anybody have any other examples of any of the four that they would like to share? Do you want the mic or not?
I was just wondering how systemic racism fits into that, when you say systemic.
Yeah, there are other words that people use. I think of systemic as very similar to structural, because it's across systems. There's also cultural racism, which I think is sort of overlaid over all of this. Yeah, there are a lot of words. This isn't exhaustive. But how do you think of systemic racism?
I thought it was structural.
Yeah.
I just have a word questions instead of what you were just talking about. So I know a lot of anti-racist scholars think that they people of color and non-white and writing about race. I'm just curious why you decided to go with people of color as opposed to non-white.
Non-white by nature, white is the majority, and then to say non-white, that's more like isolating versus acknowledging like we do have different color and we are different people. So I feel like non-white is kind of just negating the fact that I am a person of color. And it is not really inclusive for me, and I feel like that's more of a privilege thing than an actual like preference, personal thing. I don't know, you can.
Yeah, I also think that non-white normalizes white.
Well, that's usually white as the
White.
sort of,
Like, we're normal.
foundation of white.
We're the regular people, and then they're the not-white people, they're a different thing.
Just
And
from
like,
the anti-racist scholars' perspective, that is the argument, that the only thing that's shared between people of color, it makes the assumption that all people of color are the same, but it's not.
oh, yeah, no, it's certainly problematic. Yes, thank you for pointing that out. The term people of color can also be problematic
Yes.
because a lot of times people are talking about black people and they say people of color. It's like imprecise. Or you might say people of color, and like when you're looking at race-based statistics with policing, stop rates for Asian-appearing people are way less than for white people. So then if you lump all people of color together, it actually dilutes how bad it is for Latinx and African-American appearing people. So saying people of color can be very problematic, I agree, and it's the best we have right now. For times when we mean it as a full, like anybody who has brown skin and doesn't have European heritage, sort of shorthand for that. I mean, who doesn't have light skin.
Yes.
Sorry, I said that wrong. Is that helpful?
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up. It's imprecise.
It's a big debate in the anti-racist scholar community, so I was just
Yeah.
curious why you, because I know people think about this stuff.
Yeah, people think about this a lot. That's a good point. Okay, any other examples anybody wants to share? No, white fragility. Okay, so anybody heard of white fragility? Yeah, some people have. So Robin D'Angelo is a scholar out in the Pacific Northwest, and she worked, my understanding, if I'm getting this right, she worked for the state of Washington for a while, working, doing HR type stuff and doing cultural competency trainings. And she worked in an interracial co-facilitation team and with mostly white people in the trainings, and started to see a pattern of white people responding a certain way to talking about racism, where they would like get all this sort of fostering and deflect the conversation and get uncomfortable. She started talking with her coworkers, and they were like, yeah, that's all the time. And she started researching it and documenting it and came up with this idea that she coined white fragility. So that's what she calls it. You can call it lots of things. It's a lot about shame. And the way that I like to describe it is in a cycle that is self-perpetuating. So I'll go through that cycle, and then we'll talk about how we can interrupt it. But I do want to say also that she doesn't like taking credit for this, because she didn't invent it, and it was only through her relationships with her colleagues of color that she really came to understand it and was able to articulate it. So I say her name because that way you can Google her. And she does good TED Talks and some good interviews and great stuff. She got an interview on Alternet that's called Why White People Freak Out. If you Google why do white people freak out, you'll find a really good interview with her. So racism exists, and we know racism, we teach it often or learned it in elementary school as these very specific individual things, like the quadrant that said individual or personal racism. That racism is somebody using a slur or drawing a swastika or spitting on somebody or discriminating against them in a really blatant way. That racism is something in history, that people who enslaved Africans were racists, that people who upheld Jim Crow laws were racists, that racism is something really bad, right? Racism is a moral quality. And that we don't teach all those other types of racism allows people to think that that's what it is, that it's pretty simple and it's pretty bad and it's pretty avoidable. Whereas if we talk about institutional, systemic, cultural racism, we come to learn that it's not really avoidable, we're swimming in it. So then when we talk about racism, a lot of times and I'm saying we as white people, and if you don't identify as white, we white people tend to get defensive, right? It feels bad, start to feel guilty. If racism is something bad people do, and you're talking to me about maybe benefiting from racism, I'm gonna start feeling bad, right? start to feel guilty, start to feel uncomfortable, self-conscious, maybe tense physically, my anxiety might start going up. But that can then move into this experience of deep shame and fragility where I tolerate the conversation so little that I need to change it so that it's no longer about, I upset you when I said, can I touch your hair? Now it's about, I didn't mean it, I'm so sorry, oh my God, I'm so sorry, can you forgive me? I just, the other day I had this, and it turns into this whole thing about me and what I meant and my intent, instead of dealing with the harm that was done, right? And she did physiological testing on white people and talked to them about racism and found that skin temperature, respiratory rate, heart rate, blood pressure escalated in some people to the point of being on par with drug withdrawal. So there are white people who can get so escalated talking about racism that we feel like we're going to die. And I don't think I've been to that point, but I admit, I have had moments where I feel so deeply uncomfortable I want to disappear. And I have a ringing in my ears, and I don't know how many of you can relate to that, but that nervousness is very real. I see it all the time when I talk to white people. We saw a whole lot of it here a couple days ago. It's amazing how describing the white fragility cycle can make people act it out. And it's normal. We do get defensive, and the question is, what are we going to do about it? Unfortunately, what a lot of people do is they not want to talk about it, because it feels really bad. And nobody wants to feel bad, so we avoid talking about things that we can avoid talking about. And that happens on both the micro level and the macro level, because we think about individual relationships, like my cousin Sam says things that offend me, and I call him on it regularly enough that he has stopped wanting to talk to me. Because he doesn't want to talk about racism or other oppressions. He doesn't want to talk about violence. He just wants to say whatever he's going to spew out of his mouth. So he doesn't spew in front of me. It also happens with curriculum development and textbooks and even children's literature, anything. We can control what's in there because we white people have the power, not each of you individually. And I want to just take a pause and note that this idea of privilege and skin privilege does not mean that your life is easy. And I think a lot of people, especially working class or white people, will have a response of, I do not have privilege. I can't pay for my heat. I have a disabled kid. My food stamps won't pay for diapers. Right? These are real problems. This is not acceptable. Life can be really, really hard, and if you layer racism on top of it, it's harder. So it's not about saying poverty isn't hard. It's not about saying if you have skin privilege, your life is easy. Privilege doesn't mean comfortable. It just means there isn't this other layer on top of it. Right? Does that make sense? It's a really hard thing for people who, are living hand to mouth to hear that they have any sort of privilege, but you don't feel privileged when that's your life. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just share an example about my son-in-law, Puerto Rican people in New York City, in Spanish Harlem. And he and my daughter got married 3 years ago. They have a baby now, and they live with us because we moved there too far. But the thing I want to say is, what happens to him on a regular basis is he's not even that dark skinned, but at his work with people who are poor or who are socioeconomically challenged in some of the jobs that they do, he on a daily basis, when he does something they don't agree with, gets told to go back to Mexico, to, you don't belong here, you weren't born here, you're not American. I mean, he hears this every single day. And what I'm just trying to say to you is, he appears white. If he was in his own culture in New York City, nobody would be saying this. And so it's not about the people here today, and I know there's a lot of people who are frustrated, but I want to say to you is, I screw up too. I don't think anybody here is bad because everybody tries really hard for our kids. But just understand that what I think that we need to remember is there is that extra layer. So if he goes to work like everybody else, he's poor like everybody else that he works with, making ends meet and trying to raise a family. But he also has those constant comments being made
generational issues too, that will impact a person of color differently than a white person. You know, that there's a history of white people being elevated, like things like the GI Bill, which most people have heard of. When soldiers came back from World War II, they were supported and recognized through a bunch of benefits, including like low interest housing loans and no down payment, basically giving housing opportunities. And that was not afforded to African American or Indigenous or other soldiers other than the white soldiers. And that was a written policy, right? That now impacts people because of how wealth gets transferred, which is usually through poverty. And somebody worked the numbers at one point that if you had bought a house at that point, you were afforded a house through the GI Bill, what that means for your descendants now in terms of wealth. And so when we look at the wealth gap, there's a tremendous amount of poor white people, but you're way more people if you're black or Latinx or Indigenous.
Oh, can I add on to the comment? Something I wanted to highlight is with that example, if a white person may mess up, it may be like, oh, what's going on? Do you need to talk? Versus, like you said, with a person of color, like, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? It's a difference where the other person, the white person, is met with sympathy, and the person of color is met with the oppression. So that's the extra layer.
Right. Like my kids could be out in the world wearing raggedy clothes that we get at Goodwill, and no one's going to look at them and be like, their mom doesn't know how to dress them because she's white. Right? Nobody's going to think that. You would? Okay, so do you think we could give them a couple minutes? So I think we're over halfway, but I think that it's hard to sit for 2 full hours. So I'm going to say the next thing we're going to have to do is talk to a buddy about where you can interrupt this, either internally when it happens to you, if you see it happening for somebody else, or how to avoid it spiraling to begin with. So while we take a 3-minute break, see if you can also talk to somebody about how you would interrupt this cycle. Make sense? Okay, short break.
I had a conversation this morning with a number of people.
Think about where to interrupt this, and I want to hear some examples. How can you interrupt this cycle? Yeah.
I think it's going to be clear what you're getting at. I mean, words really important to me, and this idea that this is not racism, the fact it's not a physical case. So just as a white person, I know it's been my experience in my undergrad in New York. Was when one of my good friends told me I'm racist because I benefit from the structure. So I think we need to change that narrative early on. It's really important to show that there is a structural system and that racism is embedded in the
Yeah.
But they stuff like that.
Right at the first part, change how we teach people what racism is. It's not just that someone's bad, but it's a system we live in. Yeah.
I've actually talked a little bit about it in my class before with students. And used, to get them to see that this is something that's been going on for a long time and still continues, is to have them think about, what if you were given a 300-year head start to race? Okay? And look at it that way. And then people tell her, okay, now you can start, but else you're going to have to jump over hurdles too.
Right. It's like, how did I get on third base? Did I hit a triple or was I born here? Who else has examples of where we can stick this cycle? Yeah.
I was talking about this right before we came, but just kind of that place where you limit when and how you discuss it.
Yeah.
It's like I pull out when I'm not into it. I can choose where I put my energies, and when I'm tired, or I have to make photocopies and here, there, and there, and that is just not how a person lives who lives with it as a daily reality.
Right.
So that's the place that, while I have definitely identified with all pieces of that cycle, that's the place where I feel like I just have a real benefit, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Like, people with black kids can't afford not to tell them what to do in the hospital moment. Right?
right? I can choose when to talk to my white kids about racism. Yeah, and it's hard to talk about racism for me. It has been historically, less so now that I do it all the time, but very hard initially because I did not grow up talking about it. My parents were from Philadelphia, New York. We relocated to Rutland in '73. I was 3 years old when we moved there in '48. And so I grew up, I don't know, whatever, I'm not a Vermonter, that's for sure. Grew up in Burlington, I wasn't born here. But they're like nice liberal Jews, you know, they're lefties, they're not radicals, and in the 70s and 80s, the going thinking was basically about colorblindness and treat everyone the same. And which sort of told me not to talk about it. And I didn't have people of color, barely any people of color in my school, none in my neighborhood, none in my family at that time, none of my close friends. So I didn't have any real life relationships that I could learn from. But I saw TV, and there was Good Times and the Jeffersons, and I could see that they were different than me. But I couldn't talk about it. So I had this cognitive dissonance going on of like, my parents were like, everyone's the same, but I don't think everyone's the same, but I better not talk about it because if I talk about it, I'm a racist. So I had a lot of stuff to get over in my own, you know, like I had a lot to unpack to be able to talk about this with more comfort than I used to have. And I think of it a little bit like learning a foreign language, that learning to talk about race and racism as an adult is like learning another language. And that if I was learning to speak Portuguese and I messed up, well, first of all, I would assume I'm going to mess up. I would assume I'm not getting it right. And I know it's going to be a lot of trying to conjugate verbs. And I'm going to have to think how to do it as close to right as I can. And then when somebody corrects me, I'm going to be like, thank you. Okay, good, thanks. That's how you say that, and I'm going to try to remember. And if they say it, and I'm like, wait, but how did that, I didn't understand, I'm going to go look it up in my book or online. So similarly with learning race and racism, I want to remember, you know, to speak about race and racism. If I don't know what word to use, I don't know, like, should I say black? Should I say man of color? Is it even a man? Like, how do they identify? Like, I get all hung up on words, and like, Afro-American, like where, how do I say it? And I'm talking about the 50s and they use this other word then, should I use that word now? Like, it's hard to know what to say sometimes. And we're going to make mistakes as we're learning, and that stinks. But we've got to do it. We've got to stumble, and then we've got to pick ourselves back up and just say, oops, and then not make it about us, not freak out, right? Or if I freak out, what do I do to calm myself? Like, what do any of you do when you have anxiety? What do you teach kids to do when they have anxiety, or they get escalated, or they get dysregulated emotionally? What do you do to soothe yourself? Anyone? Breathe. What's that? Take a walk. Take a walk. Make sure if you take a walk in the middle of a conflict that you say, I need a minute so that I can come back and be more present, so that you don't think it's this bad. What else? Take a break, take a breath.
I talk to somebody else, so like I call somebody up and said, I gotta talk about something.
Yeah, we need a buddy, an accountability buddy. Some people pray, meditate, count, right? Count to 10 before you say anything, right? We've heard that. People write. Yeah, journal. Yeah, there's a lot of good tools to calm ourselves down so that we can try to stay engaged. And then we need to remember to expect discomfort, right? It was at the beginning. Expect discomfort, not death. It's okay to be uncomfortable. As white people, and I don't know how many other identity areas where you are in your social location, but for me, as somebody with a formal education, who's white, who's cisgender, who's in an opposite sex relationship, like I have a lot of social locations where this society is set up for me where I don't have to think about it. It's just, I'm one of the normals, right? I fit the bill in all those ways. And so when I'm challenged to be uncomfortable, I'm less used to being uncomfortable than people who don't fit those norms.
People who don't fit societal norms have a much more resilient ability, much more resiliency to be uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable to walk around in the world surviving oppression. So when I become uncomfortable about something that I used to be uncomfortable about, I'm not good at that. Like, we need to practice. I need to practice that. Just be like, maybe I'll count to 10, maybe I'll take 5 breaths, maybe I'll take a walk, maybe I'll talk to someone, maybe it's the next day, and I'm still like, I can't shake it. And that's okay, like that's where I am right now. This is hard stuff, and I'm willing to be uncomfortable knowing that I'm the least likely to die of racism as a white person.
Oh, Rachel, I wanted to add something. To the point where self-education, where you do your own research, you Google, you buy books, you watch videos, is very important to not just look at one book or video and assume you understand Black people. I understand Latina X. I got it. Because based on each individual, things will be different. Because we're raised in different places. Some families talk about race, some don't. Some they just talk about it with their friends. So you don't know the frame of context. So the important thing is with self-education to have different voices within those communities. And then also, if you do have close relationships with people who want to talk about race, it's important to do check-ins. Because sometimes I just don't have the capacity to talk about being Black and a woman. I just want to drink coffee. I don't want to conversate. I just want to be. So making sure people with those oppressed identities have the headspace to think about, to share. And also, I think it's really important for white people to share their experience too, because it's not all about me. If this is a relationship, it's a two-way street. It's not the Tanisha show. So just being willing to have that transparency and like content warnings, I don't know if people know that phrase. So let's say if you have a feeling you might say something that's racist to a person of color, being like, I don't know, but I might say something, but I do want to engage. Do you have that headspace to talk about this right now? And if you don't, we'll find another time. So just making sure you're setting the stage for a conversation that's really going to be impactful with a person who can provide that content. Those were the 2 notes I wanted to say because I feel like it's really important for those type of relationships. And please don't walk up to a person you don't know, hey, I like your hair, can I touch it? Or just touch. Because somebody might get some hands or you might get a reaction that you're not expecting. Because for me, when somebody goes to touch my hair, I feel like I'm in a lab and you're trying to figure out the secret sauce and you always want to know and I'm your prime opportunity. And I feel like that's very dehumanizing. So just take it from a space to be like, hey, I want to talk about your hair. Can you talk about hair today or is that something you don't want to get into right now?
I'll say that not only in Vermont, but nationwide, there's not a lot of interracial relationships. 75% of white people in the United States do not have a single close friend of color. Like, that's normal, even outside of Vermont. So we know that relationships are a great way to break down barriers and to unlearn prejudice and stereotypes, but we don't always have that opportunity. So what I do is I consume a lot of media made by people of color. That I don't consume any mainstream media because I already know what the white world is telling me. So I listen to podcasts and radio stations, TV shows, I read books, I watch movies that are made by people of color. And we have a whole list of those on our website. If you go to our website, which is on the literature and stuff, PJCET, or go to resources and scroll down to see media by people of color. Really good stuff out there so that we're not asking the 1 or 2 people who are at our faith-based congregation or who live in our neighborhood and we work with to do the emotional labor of educating us. If it's a close relationship, like Tanisha said, great. That's great, you're lucky. And be thankful. Because most of us don't get that. And so go elsewhere, there's lots of ways to get it.
Yes. Okay, so for this part of the presentation, we're talking about racial justice and the difference between being active or passive with being racist or anti-racist. So for the active part, you know what your idea is or your feeling is and you act upon it. So for example, white supremacists. So lately there has been flyers posted about their ideas, their agenda, what they want to bring forth. And this is active racism because we know that they want to eliminate people of color. White people are superior, and that's the mantra we want, and that's what we want to stay true. We don't want to include other people. So that is active racism. And then for passive, this is, you may believe in white supremacy, but you don't do anything about it. You just have it there. And then for active anti-racism, anti-racist, you do the self-reflection as we've been talking about, where you think about, oh, where do I have privilege and oppression? Where do I have privilege and how do I want to rework that? What can I do to create support for my students in my classrooms, for any relationships that I do have with people of color, or how can I stop the racist comments? Or when the behavior happens, what can I do about it? And this can also take the form of a protest. Let's say you go to the protest, or the people during the protest, they need food, they need water, and you bring those things. Another option is you really feel passionate about politics. So you write to Congress about different things we could do for racial rights. For passive anti-racist, you know language is bad. You know the harm it has on people of color. And when you hear it, you say nothing. You do nothing. You go about your day. You may think about what happened, but you don't step up. So, and being a passive anti-racist defeats the whole part of anti-racism. Like, that's the whole point, is to take the action once you know the knowledge and the awareness of the people. And when you say you care about people, you fight. If you're a mama, father, auntie, cousin, you're fighting for your family. You don't let nobody take what you love or harm what you love. So that's the same with people you have relationships with or people you claim you care about.
Can I ask the question before you go on?
Yes.
Do you see the difference between a passive racist and a passive anti-racist? And the impact on the world?
Not really.
So if you believe yourself to be an anti-racist, you might in fact be the same thing as an anti-racist. I mean, a racist, unless you're active. So that's it for a minute. Hopefully I said it right. There's like a lot of couple negatives in this slide. It's a little weird.
Sorry.
No, it wasn't good. I created it. So if a passive anti-racist is the same as a passive racist, and you've been like, racism's bad, but not doing anything about it, you might be having the same impact on the world as somebody who thinks racist thoughts blatantly and doesn't act on it. So if you don't want to be in that top right category, you got to move out of the bottom right category. You got to get in the bottom left category if you don't want to be up there. Because these two things have the same impact on the world. Yeah.
Just a quick question about, or just a comment about teaching. I think maybe one issue is you hear something whether or not you say it, but we make a lot of choices about what we present as content. So there's a major difference between saying, this is just the book we read, that's what we've always done, versus I'm gonna actually seek out some story or some perspective, and that would be kind of an actionable thing, even if it's not something that your student knows you did.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
And I think you can be very explicit about that. You're like, in this class, we're gonna commit to having a different range of voices, and this is why we're doing it, so you can get some exposure. So it's not until you go to college and then you get a job, you're like, oh, people are different. And then you finally engage in those things, because a lot of times with the workforce, you don't have an option to not do when people are different. You're in it. So I think the earlier we can develop the skill set to engage in differences and not be so awkward, and if you are awkward, navigating that is so much better. So I really appreciate that comment. So now, did somebody say something? Okay, so now we're going to go into a quote by Martin Luther King. And this quote really gets to the point about passive anti-racism and saying that if you're silent, you're not helping. It's a cycle. And the thing is, no change doesn't happen overnight, but the more we speak up, the more we band together, we can make a difference. And the thing is, we can do small things that add up to a big thing. So imagine if all the teachers decided they're going to have different perspectives in their courses, in their readings. And then the students from different classes would be like, oh, did you learn about this culture, environment? What do you think? And you may spark conversation. Versus when only one teacher does it, people are like, oh, I'm doing this thing. Why? It's kind of stupid. What are you doing? Or also setting the tone to be like, this is why we're doing X and this is why it matters. Because a lot of the times when you set the stage to do a cool thing or a progressive thing to include people and you don't explain it, it glosses over. People don't catch on. So I think it's really important to speak up, to engage, and to think of dynamic ways to set the tone for being inclusive. So that's why you can't be silent, because you're just like the people who have the thoughts but aren't saying it. So now is a part of the presentation where you can brainstorm. So all the things we talked about, examples we couldn't really get into earlier in the presentation, now's the time to brainstorm and let's talk about it with partners. Whether you want to do it with the same partner or switch it up, it's up to you, but we're going to provide, I don't know how many minutes, but we're going to provide like 5 minutes to talk about different ways to do things. Now that you have a better understanding of racism.
And if you want to stand up and move to other people, feel free.
So I teach science, and so I was kind of thinking about like, how do you incorporate that piece in there? And so I was kind of thinking about how there's a lot of famous white scientists, but like pointing out their story and like how they actually got there. So like Darwin is a classic example, like being from a wealthy family and having an opportunity to do a world tour and just write and have that space. And if I put that opportunity to everybody, maybe there would be other Darwins that wouldn't necessarily be a white European male. Or thinking about like trade winds and how that kind of helps with colonization, right? So why is Europe colonizing North America and North America not going the other way? And maybe that has to do with just geography or where you happen to be born. So kind of trying to bring those conversations into a science context.
Okay. Thank you, that's great. Anybody else?
So mine's more of a broad suggestion. I'm luckily working in a different kind of environment.
Can you all hear back there?
No. We're not standing up. No, I'll stand up. So mine's more of a broad suggestion. I have the luxury of being in a classroom that am not stuck teaching one subject, and we actually have a lot of conversations about a lot of things that impact the kids. And I just feel like one of the things we need to do is just start having conversations. One of the things, when Adam Taylor came on board, I think there was a lot of little buzz, but there was no conversations. And I think that we do a disservice to our kids when you just don't have a conversation about, I have a student, and I'll give you an example. I have a student who will tell you that his father is pretty much a white supremacist. I luckily I'm privileged enough to have a paraeducator this year who's from Jamaica. It has been an amazing and a fantastic opportunity for my classroom to be able to have a different cultural exposure and to be able to have these conversations with her and the racism she faces in Vermont, and to bring it into that classroom and have whole room conversations about it. And I just feel like we just need to be talking to our kids about more than just, and I don't know if it's the current events or anything, but we need to be talking to all of our kids.
there is a pretty prevalent myth that talking about race and racism is racist, and that we have to be able to get it right to talk about it. And I disagree with both of those things. And there's actually one of the things that's very clear in white culture is this idea of perfectionism and this needing to have all the facts before we can address anything, right? That we don't. We're allowed to make mistakes, and we're allowed to get into a conversation and maybe get over our head and then say, oh my gosh, I'm over my head. You know what? I don't know the answer to that. I'm going to go do some research and get back to you tomorrow. And then go do some research. Like sometimes our students will prompt us to go learn more. It happens to me with my children all the time. Right? When I'm talking about race and racism.
I think a good practice to kind of think of is when you're interacting with somebody who looks, their physical makeup looks different, to be like, I'm not going to try to figure out the story before they even open their mouth. And what I mean by that is like, oh, she's black, so maybe her name is this. She's a woman, so maybe she thinks like that. And then I'm talking and you don't retain anything because you're trying to put my story together. So a thing I like to do with different identities that I don't inhabit is to be like, when we talk, I'm just gonna listen and pick up what they tell me, and then if they're willing to disclose, have conversations that go deeper. But in that moment, if we're not there and they don't want to take it there, that's okay. And I think the more we listen, the more we pick up. So I think it's really about slowing down our judgments and like having this instant, I need to know, which is really hard because by nature, that's how we survive. Am I gonna walk across the street or am I gonna stay on the same street? Like, am I gonna get around? Like, that's the snap judgments. But I think when we're interacting with people who are different, we can just be like, I'm actually gonna listen to what you're saying and then see what I can pick up without having to be like, oh, I need to know X, Y, Z, before we even engage. Oh, anybody else want to share out before we close? We have 5 more minutes.
I just wanted to share something that really pointed out to me the world that we walk in. I'm a theater teacher, and I take kids to Nebraska every year to the International Thespian Festival. And I had a kid who would not wear his badge. And it was really important that you wear your badge, because if you don't wear your badge, you go to court and the director gets in trouble. And I came across him, and I kind of run out of cute ways to get him to wear it. And I came across him, he's sitting with a bunch of kids, and he's not wearing his badge. And so I decided to be cute, and I was saying, one of these things is not like the other. And my assistant is punching me, and I said, come back. And I finished the song, and this young man of color raised his hand. And I hadn't seen him. I'd only seen my kid without the badge. Fortunately, my kid stood up and said, it's me, I'm not wearing my badge. And I said, it hurt my heart so much that this kid would think that this theater person, who he didn't know from Adam, would think that I was singing about him. And that made me go, that really changed. I mean, that changed me in terms of how I saw the world and how I saw the world from your point of view. That makes sense. And for him to feel that way, and for him to have that as his reality, that's why this is important.
Yeah, I think you're speaking to the point that a person of color may have a certain experience, and the fact of the matter is, like, you don't know just how, like, with pronouns, you don't know how somebody identifies with their pronouns until they open their mouth and they say it. So I think it's really important for us to pull back and just develop that freedom to be like, this is a human, and I need to listen to fully comprehend who they are, how they show up, how do they want to be perceived, not how I perceive them. So, thank you so much. I'm done.
First and foremost, since that just happened, I want to thank Kathy Arch for coining, I don't know him from Adam. I'm like, all right, everybody's going to be saying that. I don't know him from Adam. Thank you so much for the time you gave to this today, and thank you so much for everything you shared so openly, honestly, and having those conversations. Real fast, Steve, Jay, Chris, and Hubert and I went to a conference at Cambridge a couple years ago called Race, Equity, and Leadership in Education. And one of the speakers was a professor from Holyoke College. And her job was to be on a panel about discussing race and equity and leadership in education. And then she was taking some Q&A. And this young man stood up at the microphone and he asked this question, kind of, I can't get it entirely right. And he said to her, she's a black woman, and he says to her, this black young man stand up, and he says, what do you do when you are faced with someone or people who are racist and are pushing that racism on you? How do you handle that? And the most important thing she said these things. She paused, she breathed, and she said, first she said, I know if I tell that person they're racist, the conversation's over. The most important thing I want to do is keep the conversation going. Now, I don't know if that's right or not, but I took that as a very important statement. And when she said it, I thought, that's the most important thing we can all do. So this start, like they said, like you said, about making sure we're having those conversations is really important. And I thank you so much for your honesty and openness and discussion, and I thank you for keeping the conversations going. Have a great lunch, have a great day, have a great evening. Hold on, don't go anywhere yet. I was just kidding.
These feedback surveys are so valuable to us. Please, please, please don't leave until you fill it out. Don't forget we've got posters for the Social Justice Symposium and Block Party that you can bring and hang wherever. If you really don't want to read the newsletter, please leave it here. We'll give it to